Samurai and ninja are usually presented as complete opposites. The samurai stands in the open, wearing expensive armor and talking about honor. The ninja hides in the shadows, dressed entirely in black, carrying 17 weapons, and somehow disappearing whenever the story needs him to. One fights with honor, the other throws a smoke bomb and leaves. Simple, right? Not exactly, because historically, samurai and ninja were not rival character classes. A samurai was a member of Japan's warrior class. A ninja, also called a shinobi, was someone performing a covert job, such as spying, scouting, infiltration, or sabotage. And here is the plot twist. A samurai could sometimes perform ninja work, so the real difference was not always who they were. It was what assignment they had that day. To understand why both became legendary, we need to separate the people who actually existed from the characters that movies, anime, and video games created later. Let us start with the samurai. Most people imagine that samurai was a job title. It was closer to a social status. Early samurai came from armed warrior families who protected estates, enforced authority, and fought for powerful landowners. Then, in the late 1100s, warriors became the real political force behind Japan's government. The emperor and imperial court still existed, but military rulers increasingly controlled the country. Japan had entered the age of the shoguns. A shogun was the country's supreme military ruler. Below the shogun were powerful regional lords called daimyo. Below the daimyo were samurai who served them. Think of it as a giant feudal company. The shogun was at the top. The daimyo were regional executives. The samurai handled security, local management, and hostile corporate takeovers. Except the hostile takeovers involved actual castles. In return for service, samurai could receive land, housing, rice payments, protection, or political status. But the arrangement came with serious responsibilities. Depending on the time period and the samurai's rank, he might have to obtain his own armor and weapons, maintain horses, organize followers, and arrive ready for war. Imagine receiving an emergency message from your boss. There is a major problem at the office. Please bring your own equipment, transportation, supplies, and private army. The salary package was complicated. During Japan's long periods of civil war, the samurai were extremely useful. Regional lords constantly fought over land, influence, succession, and power. All the usual workplace disagreements, just with more arrows. But samurai were not simply sword fighters, especially during periods of peace. They also worked as administrators, guards, tax officials, teachers, legal authorities, and government employees. Japan had successfully turned part of its warrior class into middle management. Education was also important. Samurai might study literature, calligraphy, philosophy, strategy, poetry, and ceremonial arts, such as the tea ceremony. They were expected to understand both the arts of war and the arts of culture. Being able to defeat an opponent was impressive. Being able to defeat him and then write a tasteful poem about the experience was better. This brings us to one of the most famous ideas associated with the samurai, Bushido, meaning the way of the warrior. Bushido is often presented as one strict code that every samurai followed for centuries. Reality was messier. Different families, regions, and periods emphasized different values. But over time, and especially during the peaceful Edo period, writers and authorities developed an idealized image of proper warrior behavior. That image emphasized values such as loyalty, courage, discipline, duty, self-control, and honor. It was less like one ancient law and more like centuries of warrior expectations, gradually being organized into a philosophy. The ideal samurai was supposed to remain calm, loyal, educated, and prepared to die rather than live in disgrace. Imagine having a workplace culture where making your boss look bad is not just awkward, it becomes a major philosophical crisis. The most extreme expression of this honor system was seppuku. Seppuku was a form of ritual suicide associated with the warrior class. It could be performed to avoid capture, accept responsibility, protest a decision, or receive an honorable death after being condemned. The act was connected symbolically with revealing a person's courage and inner intentions. But formal seppuku was not always a sudden, private decision during the Edo period. It could become a carefully managed ceremony involving permission, witnesses, specific clothing, final statements, and official procedures, because apparently even a ritual death could not escape paperwork. The participant was often accompanied by a skilled swordsman called a kaisha kunin. His role was to end the ceremony quickly and prevent prolonged suffering. It was a grave responsibility requiring precision, trust, and control. This was not casual violence. It was a formal institution created by a society that placed enormous importance on status, responsibility, and public reputation. But then Japan experienced something that created a major problem for the samurai: peace. In the early 1600s, the Tokugawa shogunate united the country and established a government that lasted for more than 2.5 centuries. Large civil wars became rare. Cities expanded, commerce grew, culture flourished. This was excellent news for almost everyone. It was slightly more complicated for the professional warrior class. When your identity is built around fighting wars, 2 centuries of peace can create an uncomfortable performance review. Many samurai became administrators and officials. Some became teachers and scholars. Others struggled financially because their fixed rice payments did not always keep pace. With a growing money-based economy, you could have high social status and still be completely broke. A familiar human achievement. Then, in the 1800s, foreign powers arrived with modern ships, firearms, and industrial technology. Japan's leaders realized that the country needed to modernize quickly. The old shogunate collapsed, and the Meiji government began rebuilding Japan as a centralized, modern state for the samurai. The changes were brutal. A national army based on conscription meant military service was no longer their exclusive role. Their hereditary payments were eliminated or converted into government bonds. Their special privileges disappeared. And in 1876, most former samurai were prohibited from wearing swords in public, with exceptions for groups such as the military and police. For centuries, wearing 2 swords had visibly announced, "I am a samurai." Now the government was saying, "Thank you for your service. Please remove the entire symbol of your identity." It was like telling a knight to hand over his armor, surrender his title, lose his guaranteed income, and begin retraining for an office job. Firearms also changed warfare. Swordsmanship required years of practice. A modern rifle allowed a conscript with much less training to become dangerous from a distance. Centuries of highly specialized combat education had encountered new technology. The technology was not sentimental. Some former samurai resisted these reforms and launched rebellions, but the new national army defeated them. The samurai did not vanish overnight. Many former samurai became military officers, teachers, officials, business leaders, and members of Japan's new elite. But the samurai class itself was finished. The employee had survived. The job category had been deleted. Now we can finally talk about ninja. And the first thing to understand is that a real ninja probably did not want you to know he was a ninja. That would defeat the entire point. Historical shinobi were used for jobs involving intelligence gathering, reconnaissance, infiltration, deception, sabotage, and communication behind enemy lines. Their goal was not to enter through the front gate, challenge the strongest guard, and begin a dramatic 10-minute fight. Their goal was to complete the mission. Without creating a dramatic 10-minute fight, open combat usually meant something had gone wrong. A successful shinobi might enter an area, observe the defenses, learn the schedule, collect information, spread confusion, and leave without anyone realizing an operation had taken place. The greatest ninja achievement was not defeating 50 enemies. It was giving the 50 enemies no reason to look for you. This is why the famous all-black ninja uniform makes very little practical sense. Imagine entering a farming village, dressed in a black hood, face covering, armed guards, and a collection of visible weapons. Every person in town would immediately think that is either a ninja or someone making an extremely unusual fashion decision. Real operatives needed to blend in. They could disguise themselves as farmers, merchants, monks, servants, travelers, performers, or other ordinary people. The right disguise depended on where they were going and what information they needed. The iconic black costume appears to owe much of its popularity to Japanese theater. Stagehands often wore black because audiences were expected to treat them as invisible. That visual language was perfect for fictional assassins who suddenly appeared from the darkness. Over time, theater, art, novels, movies, manga, and video games turned the costume into the official ninja look. Historically inaccurate, visually excellent. Ninja are also closely associated with Shuriken, the famous metal throwing stars that fictional characters seem to store in unlimited quantities. Shuriken were real weapons, but they were not exclusive to ninja, and their importance has been exaggerated by entertainment. Historical ninja manuals describe a much wider collection of practical equipment. Climbing tools, ropes, fire, starting devices, portable lights, disguises, medicine, tools for entering buildings, items for crossing water. The real ninja toolkit looked less like a fantasy weapons inventory and more like the equipment bag of an extremely suspicious maintenance worker. The ninja's strongest weapons were often patience, preparation, local knowledge, and deception. They studied routes, they observed routines, they learned passwords, they watched how people behaved. They used weather, darkness, terrain, and timing. A sword could help you win one fight. Accurate information could help your lord win an entire war. Some Japanese castles and elite residences also developed features that made infiltration more difficult. The most famous example is the Nightingale floor. These wooden floors produced a chirping or squeaking sound when someone walked across them. The noise could alert guards that someone was moving through the building. Imagine spending years learning to walk silently, only to be defeated by architecture that screams whenever you touch it. Other buildings used controlled entrances, confusing layouts, concealed spaces, narrow corridors, and defensive positions. The building itself became part of the security system. 2. Regions became especially famous for ninja traditions, e.g. in what is now Mie Prefecture and Kōka in what is now Shiga Prefecture. These were mountainous regions containing networks of local warrior families. Their terrain and political organization helped communities develop reputations for guerrilla tactics, intelligence gathering, infiltration, and irregular warfare. Specialists from EGA and Kōka could be hired by powerful lords for specific operations, which means some ninja functioned less like permanent employees and more like highly specialized contractors. Samurai had a social rank, an employer, and a visible public identity. Ninja work depended on flexibility, secrecy, and results. The samurai had status, the ninja had a contract, and probably no benefits. Kōka also became strongly associated with herbal medicine. Knowledge of plants and treatments was useful, not only for health, but also for surviving long journeys and operating away from support. This is another reason the popular image of the ninja as nothing more than an assassin is misleading. Espionage required far more than fighting. A useful operative needed memory, observation, social intelligence, physical endurance, navigation skills, and the ability to convincingly become someone else. So, which was more powerful, the samurai or the ninja? That question is a little like asking whether a soldier is more powerful than a spy. They were built for different situations. The samurai represented visible authority. The ninja specialized in hidden information. The samurai's status worked only when people recognized him. The ninja's mission worked best when people did not. One relied on reputation, the other relied on being forgettable. But history did not preserve them equally. The real samurai included warriors, officials, scholars, wealthy elites, and impoverished retainers. Popular culture compressed them into the perfect, honorable swordsman. The real ninja performed reconnaissance, infiltration, sabotage, and intelligence work. Popular culture gave them identical black uniforms, magical disappearing skills, and an unlimited supply of throwing stars. History created complicated people. Entertainment gave them better branding, and that may be the real reason. Samurai and ninja are still everywhere. They represent two fantasies that never get old. The samurai is the fantasy of standing openly for something, mastering a skill, and being respected for it. The ninja is the fantasy of moving unseen, outsmarting everyone, and escaping before the consequences arrive. So, which would you choose? The samurai's path, with status, discipline, education, and loyalty to a powerful lord. Or the ninja path, with disguises, secret missions, flexible contracts, and absolutely no job security.